I was asked to make a sort of how to start building pedals video, going through a little bit of things that I think could be a good way to get into the hobby and get started. So, in today's video, we are gonna go through a couple of things that you can do to try and get into the hobby or try it out, and hopefully you will think this is fun and interesting and you'll become a super nerd for pedal building. I'm gonna try to put these in order so that the first thing is sort of the first thing, and then we have steps that you can take after so that you're moving forward. So yes, if you feel like the first thing I'm saying is maybe something super obvious that you've already done and you've already passed, then you're not really a beginner, but that's okay. You can maybe jump to the next thing and see if that is more relevant for you. And if it's not, jump to the third, and so on. But before we start, I just quickly want to mention today's sponsor, which is... I'm just joking. We don't have any sponsors here. No, but seriously, before we start, I quickly just want to talk about soldering irons. There are basically two versions that you can get. I know that there are more if there's anyone watching here that knows a little bit more, but for the sake of this, there basically are two. And the first one is just a handle with a tip and a long cable like this that you plug into your wall so that this can get heated so that you can start working. But the other one has an entire station with control knobs that lets you control the heat and see how hot it is and work that way. Now, I don't think it's necessary to have one of those when you're starting out, but I think it's a good thing to have. And if you're going to buy something, going a little bit more expensive and buying something that is nicer quality and that lets you control the heat is actually really good, and it can help you a lot when it comes to certain parts, because some parts you can damage by how much you heat them up. And it's also a good way of learning that, because it's a skill that you might as well learn from the beginning. And so think about that if this is something you think you're actually gonna get into. If you're a beginner and you feel like this is very much something that you don't know if you want to try, maybe don't buy one of those. But if you think that, oh, this is gonna be cool, this is gonna be fun, I'm actually gonna do this and I might actually really enjoy this, so then maybe get the nicer one. Obviously, either way, having a soldering iron and knowing how to solder is a good thing. If you end up building pedals or not, it can still be good for you to know. You can use it to make other things or just to like keep things working in your home. But anyway, with that out of the way, let's start trying to figure out how to begin building pedals and working on becoming good at making your own pedals. So once you've decided how much you want to spend on a soldering iron and you've gotten yourself a soldering iron, there are two things more that you need as a beginner. And the first thing is a way to clean your tip. These have a special coating on them that get damaged and rub off by time, but they can get damaged quicker if you don't keep the tip clean. And usually the way you see that the tip is gone and you need to replace it is that it's black and dirty and it looks burnt out. Another indicator is that it's hard to get solder to flow evenly and move from being solid to liquid and into whatever part or wire you're connecting to something. If it becomes like a little bead and is just staying on top and then it's like hardening and rolling away, then there's a problem with your tip. Once the tip's coating is gone and it's damaged, it's gone and you need to replace the tip. So trying to get into the habit of always cleaning your tip. Solder a little bit, clean the tip, solder a little bit, clean the tip, solder a bit. You get the drift. The next thing you need is solder, and I would say that you should get a really thin solder wire and a really thick one. So you have maybe something like 1/2 mil and 3 mil or something like that, give or take, so that you can work and play around with using different thickness and different heats. This is important because you want to apply heat as little as possible. And when I say little now, I mean time-wise. You want to make sure that you're using a little bit of solder and not, you know, like pouring down 1/2 pint of solder on your components. But you also want to make sure that you put the solder on and apply it and have the solder flow into place really quickly. So in and out quick. with the heat. Depending on what you're making, you're gonna need to use different solders. For pedal working, somewhere around a mil is gonna be the standard that you use most of the time. But as we're starting out, I would say that it's a good thing to have a couple of different thicknesses. What you then end up using and being comfortable with using later could be something different. But anyway, that's what I think you should start with. So let's start now. You have a soldering iron, you have some solder, you have a way of cleaning your tip. You could also have some flux, which I don't use that often, but it can be really good if you are having issues making things flow together and fit together. So let's begin with something simple. If you go to your second-hand store, you can buy old things like toys. Here is an old kid's walkie-talkie, for example. If you open it up, you unscrew the screws and you take out the circuit inside. Especially if you find something old, like toys from 10, 20 years ago, or like an old radio or something like that, you know, a little hand radio or a Walkman like that. You can find a PCB with a bunch of parts on it, like this one. And for our first job, you can do this a couple of times just to get the hang of it. If you feel unsure, we're going to take this PCB and we're going to apply our soldering iron and heat up all these little components here and take them out. And the reason why we're going to do this first is because that will give us a bunch of parts, and also it will let us experiment on something cheap and trashy that we're probably not going to want or use for anything anyway. So that's what we're going to do, because you can go to the second-hand store and for €1 or €2 you can buy some electronic crap thing that is old, and you can start removing all the components. Now, the reason why I'm saying that we should start with something old is both because you can get it for almost no money, but also because we want through-hole mounted components and not soldered on top components. If you've ever seen a PCB, you see that modern PCBs have really small parts, and that can be an issue because it's going to be really hard to do anything with those components. So trying to find something old. And when we're building pedals ourselves and we're not like having them manufactured, they are usually through-hole mounted parts. So that's what we're going to look for, and that's how we're most likely going to build our pedals later. And it gives us a chance to practice soldering and desoldering things, and if something gets damaged or destroyed, it doesn't matter, we can throw it away. And once you've taken all the parts from a circuit board off, or possibly 2 or 3 even, depending on how hard you think it is or how much practice you need, we put all of those into a little box or a bin or something, and we keep them to the side and we keep them so that we have parts we can use. Buying new parts like resistors and transistors is not that expensive. You can buy a package of 10 for €1 or something like that of most parts. There are some parts that are more expensive, like pots, switches, and in and output jacks, but they are still not that expensive. And so even if you feel like, oh, you might destroy these things, the parts in themselves are usually not that expensive. Okay, so now that you've unsoldered some components and you put them away, we're going to move on to our first build. And this is what it is. This is just a piece of wood with 2 output jacks put on to the side and a true bypass switch in the middle. And instead of having the 2 connections to a pedal effect or something, we're going to put on alligator clippers. And you can buy a package of 10 or 20 or something like that for €14 or something like that. Somewhere around there. I've forgotten, it's been a while since I bought them. But they are not that expensive, and it's one of those tools that you're gonna need because there's always something that needs a quick connection here and there to try things out. I have a video where I show you how to make a true bypass switch, and just soldering this in place instead will be super easy to do. It's a perfect little thing to build, to try things out, to see how things work. The only thing you have to do is the ground cable here that you maybe can see, the black one here. It's just from one output jack to the other. Now what we're going to use this for is going to plug your guitar and your amp into this, just like you would with a effect pedal, and then you're gonna try out some of the parts that you removed, some resistors and some capacitors, and see what happens. You have the true bypass so that you can select and see if you hear a difference, because if you put a resistor in there, it might not actually change the sound at all, but then you put in another resistor and it does change the sound, and you might be like, well, why is that? That moves us into the next part, which is you're gonna get a multimeter and you're gonna measure the parts and you're gonna check them and see like, oh, that one has a higher resistor value, so maybe it's restraining the signal more than the other one. And maybe there is a breaking point for what I can hear and not hear. It's a super interesting experiment to do, and you're gonna like it. Okay, so now the next thing you're gonna do is you're gonna try to find a pedal kit that you're interested in building, but we're gonna start off with something simple. I would say that a fun way to get into this is to build some sort of fuzz. Best thing to start off would be something like a fuzz face. Very simple circuits, there's no real complex components that you could easily burn. Obviously, it's always possible to screw up completely, but with something like a fuzz, I think your chances of ending up with something cool that works is higher than if you do something like, for example, a flanger, because something like a flanger can have trim pots inside that you have to use different tools to set to the right value, and it can be a little bit of a hassle as a first thing to do when you're just starting out. You won't see that in a fuzz, most likely, unless there's something really weird you picked out, but pick out something easy as your first kit to build. If you want to, you can look at some of my kit build videos and you can use those to build along, and you could actually buy those kits and build them with me. I'm gonna have links to those videos in the description below, but most of those kits are from musikding, which is a site where you can buy kits here in Europe. So if you don't live in Europe, you might want to either just buy those kits and have them sent over to you, but it could get expensive. So you might want to find either the exact same kits somewhere closer to where you live, depending obviously on where you live, or completely different kits that are made by someone else entirely. I can't tell you then exactly they are going to be the same, that there won't be some things different, but you can still look at the videos and get a hang of what is expected of you. As soon as you've built your first kit, you can attach it to this and see that it works. Now, I have no affiliations at all with musikding, but I actually do think that they do a really good job of making kits that are quality parts and the instructions are easy to follow. And I've never really had any issues with any of their kits where I've felt like, oh, parts are bad or missing, or the instructions are really bad, I can't follow along. So there are kits out there with those kind of issues will happen, but not musikding, or at least I haven't had that experienced yet. And I've built a couple of kits from them now. Definitely the best in Europe as far as I can tell. And if you're watching musikding, send me a couple of kits, sponsor me a little bit, you know. You're gonna have to drill holes in an enclosure. It doesn't have that much to do with the electronic components, but there will be a link in the description below that you can watch a video I've made a year ago or something like that, where I did drill the holes in an enclosure. It's not that hard to do, but check out that video if you feel like you want to know how to drill an enclosure. Okay, so now you've built your first pedal, and it's something like a distortion or a fuzz or something like that, and you've put it together, you made sure it works and that it's all good and nice. The next part is actually gonna be, believe it or not, to play it. And to play it for a while, actually, like every day for a week. Listen to the pedal, see what you think about it, what you like about it, what you don't like about it. Is it noisy? Is it not noisy? I mean, obviously, you know, a fuzz is noisy, but there are a bunch of background hiss and things that you don't feel your other pedals that are fuzzes have. If you have a bunch of noise, you're gonna go into the pedal and you're gonna adjust the cables and try to put them in a bit neater and nicer and make everything look a little bit better. If you have cables just lying like this, for example, you can twist them around so they are basically almost like braided, like this. And that will help. Also making sure every cable is as short as they can be without being like super taut is also a good thing. And that's obviously something you can do while you're making the kit, but most likely you're just going to be happy that you got it to work. So try to see if you can make it better by just neating it up a little bit and making everything a little bit nicer. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to actually take that pedal and you're going to try to analyze the sound. Try to think about like, oh, what is it actually doing? What is happening to my sound going through this pedal? And not just the distortion part, but like the EQing of the pedal. And then we're going to start modding it. It's going to be pretty easy to mod a kit pedal that you've made yourself because everything is really easy to see, and most likely have the schematics of the pedal as well, so you can check that for reference, and since you've build it, you know where everything is. And the first mod we're gonna do is we're gonna see if we can change out the LED for a new color, and that's just to get things going, to have a little bit of fun. It's very easy to do. See if you can even change the size and what happens if you do that. If you have a kit that comes with a small LED like this one right here, or a bigger LED like the one in this pedal enclosure right there. And there is also a value difference, different resistors. So you're gonna have to think a little bit about what you're doing. After you've changed size and possibly even the color of the LED, we're gonna look at something like, for example, the clipping. For example, if the pedal has a clipping made by diodes, it will look something like this in the circuit, and you can experiment with changing these out, changing just one out, symmetrical, asymmetrical clipping, experiment with that. I have recently made a video where I did this to a pedal. It wasn't a pedal I made, it was an Ibanez pedal. But anyway, it's going to be linked in the description below as well, so you can check that out. It's hopefully at least somewhat helpful. Now, a good thing to do is to have some sort of diary where you write all of these stuff down, what you find, what you think is happening. So for example, if you're changing the diodes and the clipping, write down what components are being switched out and what value they have and what you perceive being the change that happens. This is a transistor and it's super tiny and small, and it basically is like a half moon shaped little thing. And if you have a circuit that clips that way, you could try to change those out. Just make sure that you look up what is the first leg and which is the third leg, so you have the ABC leg in the right order, because that changes the orientation this goes in. But don't let that scare you. It's not that difficult. You're just gonna have to bend the legs to be in the right position. Also make sure you have NPN or a PNP circuit so that you buy the right parts according to that. I can't tell you what you're gonna do and what you're gonna switch out. You're gonna have to Google around and check forums and see if you find something interesting. But this time you're gonna change it. You're gonna write down what sort of change is happening, just like with the other parts. I have a video where I have a couple of fuzz pedals that are all the same circuit and where I do this change to all of them. It will also be linked in the description below, so you can check it out if you want to. It's a fun little experiment. I don't know if you can hear the difference that well in the video, but in real life it's a really big difference. Okay, so you build your first pedal, you've modded your first pedal, and now I would say that the next step will be to maybe buy another kit or two, maybe even three, and put those together. And maybe challenge yourself with something a little bit harder, like a flanger, a distortion, a overdrive, something like that. Have fun, build a couple of pedals and be creative. Don't forget to play with them and have fun in that way too. And if you want to, you can mod them as well, changing out things like diodes and LEDs and things like that. The next step is gonna be to look for toys. This is where we're gonna start to get into making something a little weird and something that you maybe haven't seen before, and that, you know, will challenge you just in the right way. Basically, what you need to do is you have to find some sort of toy that is a voice changer. Basically, for example, there are some toys that are microphones. Let's pretend this is your microphone. And what you need is a toy that lets your voice go in one end and a signal come out in the other end. And the reason why you want to do this is because there are going to be two challenges for you. And the first thing is to try to figure out the path for your signal and how to wire it up into a pedal. so that you get, your guitar going in instead of your voice, and your guitar coming out instead of your voice. And also having a true bypass, and also having an LED, and all that. And the next challenge that you're gonna see is actually you might find something that needs a different kind of voltage. Something that maybe puts in a 5 volt. And so how do you change the 9 volt power adapter into only giving you 5? That's a neat little thing. It's not super hard, but it is a challenge that I want to put out there for you. I'm not going to tell you how to do it because I think that this is one of those things that will be fun if you figure it out yourself. But I'll give you a tiny little hint. Can you see what that is? I don't know. Now you can mod those toys as well, and you can find a bunch of fun things to do with that way. Now there are gonna be mistakes, and there are gonna be complications, and there are gonna be things that don't go the way you want it to do. It's sort of a part of the game, and you're gonna be frustrated, and you're gonna be maybe even angry. And you might think that this was not a good idea, but it was. It's going to be a fun experience. You're going to learn something. Even if you don't end up being a pedal maker, making your living making pedals or something like that, I still think you're going to have fun. And especially if you try to follow along to these steps that I've shown you, it's going to be, I think, the easiest way to get something that isn't too complicated. But if you want to, I'm going to link a video where I talk about the most common mistakes that I've done. So you can check that out, and you could have that sort of in the back of your head so that when you think that, oh, I'm making a mistake here, something isn't working the way it is, let's check my pedal against his list of mistakes and see if any of those mistakes are the same. And some of them are super obvious, like, putting the ground and the lead signal of an output jack flipped around. And some of them are a little bit more annoying. This was supposed to be sort of just an entry level sort of beginning, get you going. And I'm gonna make another video where I show you all the different components and I talk about them and I try to explain as best as I can what they do so that you know that as well. I haven't done that video yet because it's gonna be a lot of work. I want to find the right way to do it so that it is as easy as possible for someone who is new to this to follow along. Because once you've done all these steps, you're gonna move into things like trying to follow schematics and trying to build your own things without a kit and basically just buy the parts you want and see what happens. But that's a couple of years, maybe even away from when you build your first kit. So take it easy and relax. And the schematic is actually kind of easy. I have one right here for a pedal. This is actually a tremolo from musikding. And we're not going to go through that in this video, but I just want to show you that it's actually easier than you might think. It's just the fact that you need to learn what all these symbols mean so that you know that. But you could see like, oh, this is where the input jack goes, and it goes into this resistor here, and it goes into this transistor there. And you just need to learn what those symbols mean. But that's the next step, and once you know the path that the signal goes and you know what happens to it along the path, you can start making your own pedals and having weird funny things. It's not something that we've jumped in on this channel yet because I want to make more beginner videos first, but that's something we're going to jump into later down the line when we have enough videos about beginner stuffs on the back end and old videos. Because this video is one day going to be an old video, even though right now as I'm filming it, it's not even a new video. It's a pre-new video. That's crazy. But anyway, in the near future, there's going to be a video about different components and what they do. I look forward to that. And until then, stay awesome and cool and go and experiment with building your first kit because it's going to be a lot of fun. And as long as you decide to start out with something simple and easy, like maybe a fuzz face, it's going to end up being awesome and cool and fun. And you just have to give yourself, the opportunity to have a win, and you're going to love it and have fun. So